In this episode of Another Zelda Podcast, Stephanie Klimov joins David in Chicago to discuss all the ways that Majora's Mask deals with grief. Hello and welcome to Another Zelda Podcast. I am David, your co-host for tonight, and my guest co-host is Steph Klimov. Stephanie, how are you?
Doing fantastic. How are you?
I just jumped right into that intro. I went right into it.
Perfect. Well done.
So, Stephanie, some people might know you as one of our contributing blog writers for AnotherZeldaPodcast.com.
Yes. I wrote my first article a couple months ago. Just kind of getting my feet wet, and I will be putting one out next month in August, actually. So I'm doing a little bit of homework, and I'm really excited to get working on that.
What's the preview? What's the topic for that one?
So it's going to be kind of like a mini book club in the form of an article, and it's the Psychology of Zelda, actually, that I'll be talking about it.
Oh, yes. Yeah. I saw it in the schedule. Mm-hmm. Very exciting. That blog might have come out before the premiere of this episode. I just realized it might be literally scheduled before, because actually let's speak to this a little bit. We're taking advantage of an opportunity here. Yes. You flew into Chicago for the Video Game Summit, which was this weekend. Today it's a Sunday morning. It's a beautiful Sunday morning. We have the windows open, so if you hear a car drive by, it's just part of being in Chicago, and I just really want to embrace the day and let the breeze come in.
Absolutely.
However, you came in for the Video Game Summit, which Celeste was also at. Mm-hmm. We recorded a live quiz episode yesterday, which is the episode just before this in release order, by the way,
right. Okay.
For AZP. And you don't fly out until tomorrow morning, and we were able to offer you our guest room here at the condo, which was a lot of fun. It's actually kind of funny because Dan has come into Chicago to record an episode or two, and he stayed in the guest room. I had my cousin come in to be on an episode or two, and they stayed in the guest room, and it's kind of becoming like the AZP. It's almost becoming like the AZP green room for the guests to come on the show.
Oh, and everything's just so great, comfortable. I slept like a rock yesterday.
It was like a good temperature last night.
Yeah.
You know, we have some fans and stuff, but we don't actually have like central air. There's a really old building that we live in.
Oh my!
It's a beautiful old building, but we don't have any central air, so it was actually pretty comfy last night, wasn't it?
Yes.
Cool. Well, so excited you're here. So we're having a fun little AZP cookout this afternoon, yes. But you and I realized, like, wait a second, we've got an hour in the morning, and I'm probably not going to see you in person until, honestly, probably 2022.
Yeah.
It's probably going to be season 5, and I'll drive to wherever I need to drive for all the guests. So since you're here, we were already spitballing possible ideas for when you were on the show, and we kind of decided, can we streamline one of those and bring it forward by like 6 or 7 months in the production queue.
I love that impromptu idea. It was great.
The impromptu idea. So we're here to discuss, it was actually your idea and I'm so pleased about it, to discuss the ways that Majora's Mask kind of deals with and expresses grief. Mm-hmm. Yep. I think it's awesome. What made you want to talk about that idea in general and then also pick it today?
Yeah, sure. So, I had a little bit of help. It is covered in one of the chapters of the Psychology of Zelda. And, I played Majora's Mask. I beat it. I did enjoy the game. It's not my favorite Zelda game, but what I appreciate and value about it is that it's just so rich and in depth with story. You get to, learn a lot about the NPCs. Lives, and they're all recycled characters, so to speak, from Ocarina of Time, which is my favorite Zelda game.
Oh, yes.
And, I'm not a psychiatrist, by any means, but I just love how Zelda is so rich in interpretation. I think one of the most important titles in the franchise that leaves room for interpretation is Majora's Mask.
Oh, wonderful. Very nice. Yeah, the Psychology of Zelda is edited by Anthony M. Bean, and he or his publicist actually reached out to AZP almost a year ago when the book first came out, and they sent us a copy, which was really cool. I gave it to Kate for a while, and then it's back. It's actually here in my hands, even though I think you purchased one. I see it with you. Yep. And there's no official connection here with them, but we have been trying to get together with Anthony to maybe speak about some of these things.
That would be amazing.
We were this close about 7 months ago. Actually, since COVID, it was like about a year and a half ago. Wow, time's really distorted for me there.
Yeah.
He was almost in Milwaukee at the same time that we would be in Milwaukee, and we really wanted to get together in person. So hopefully someday we still get to chat with Anthony M. Bean. But the book was out for a while, and I think you're in the middle of reading it right now.
Yeah, I'm like 3/4 of the way. You know, I'm actually a very, very slow reader. And for those that may or may not know me, I write novels as well. So you'd think that an author would also be an avid reader. I'm a bit slow, but I'm just inhaling this book. It's high level, like an anthology of different takes of aspects of Zelda. You know, again, I don't want to ruin it now, but it's just very interesting. It incorporates, you know, one of the best franchises, in my opinion, plus a real life application, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. So I got a little distracted for a second there because I realized we haven't gone to some of our listener feedback.
Oh, yes.
I think we'll just touch on that real quick.
Yeah.
But and then we'll dig into Majora's Mask. We have like one quick little review. We did a lot of listener feedback lately, and we had one quick one here from Goose the Goose. Okay. I don't know if that's a command or a name, but I'm hoping that it's a little bit of a reference to Groose. It probably isn't. But Goose the Goose here said, 5 stars, thanks for doing the show. I love it. Quick, simple one.
Love it.
We love it. Every time someone reviews us on Apple Podcasts, it really, really helps the show.
The searchability?
Well, what it does is Apple's algorithm, as is the case with many services, if you leave, you can like a show, but if you leave an actual review, it's showing active engagement. The fact that someone's willing to type a sentence or two is even more than them even clicking like the 5 stars or something else like that. So it's worth a lot whenever you get a review. And so we're always very, very grateful.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand the why of behind, why podcasters and just any other medium request for, a review. It carries a lot of weight and has meaning behind it. So that's nice to know. Yeah,
it does. Yeah, absolutely. We get the kindest reviews. It's really, really wonderful, the support. I've got a little bit of action on Twitter from Video Game Summit, Video Game Summit 2021. Now, we actually, on Video Game Summit, I spoke to this a little bit in the last episode, but they did not have a convention during COVID. And then as we were coming out of COVID, it was not quite last minute, but just a couple months to really put it all together. Video Game Summit, they were able to rent out actually an even bigger space than they had in previous years. And so we pulled this off. I'm getting a little off topic here. But anyway, so we were able to do our show, and we had I'm just noticing I have a little Sixfive crossover. So Daniel, who is a host of Turn by Turn, he's on Twitter at McGarMentions, Gar with two R's, MCGARR mentions. He was replying to a tweet that Celeste put out there. Celeste took a couple pictures of our booth at the show. And he said, plenty of room for Turn by Turn next year. Oh. And what he's referencing is that when he and I were texting, actually, I actually point blank said to him, I said, I think in the future we could take a lot of the video game shows that Sixfive makes and let all of them like record some live episode or something like that. Essentially, you almost make a Sixfive booth.
Yeah, a little smorgasbord of different shows. I like that idea.
We have, I think, I think it has already come out. Our newest show, Top 5 Nintendo, is coming out. Has come out for Sixfive. It's not out as of this recording, but as of listening. I was gonna be
like, wait, how have I not heard this yet?
Yep, it's our newest show, and we have 2 more in the queue. Dan's making his own show over there in St. Louis. It's just growing, super, super fun, and it's always fun to. So Turn by Turn, that show's actually doing quite well right now. I'm really proud to brag about them a little bit, and they are based on our analytics. We run trend lines and all that kind of stuff. They're about 4 months in to their show, and they are the fastest growing show after Another Zelda Podcast right now.
No kidding.
So they've really hit a niche.
That's awesome.
Yeah, very, very cool. We have a lot of great listenership on all of our other shows too, and they're all doing quite well as well. But I think Turn by Turn, they hit strong right out of the gate there, and
great to catch that momentum. Yeah,
I'm really pleased for them. It's two gentlemen that. They're nerdy in all the right ways. I love that when they send me episodes, I can't wait to listen to them. It's a lot of fun. Basically, they talk about role-playing games.
Yeah, I haven't listened to them yet, but I'm definitely going to have to hop on and give it a shot because quick side tangent. Yeah. I did recently start Dungeons & Dragons with a small group of friends virtually when COVID hit. I've never done one of those tabletop turn-based games before ever. I wasn't sure if I could get into it, but I'm just having an absolute blast. When you're in the right company, it's wicked fun. Oh, I did it again.
Hey, bring that Boston. It's all good. It's all good. Do you literally still live in Boston, or are you just outside of it now?
I'm outside of Boston now, but I lived in the city or hung out with like city folk for enough for some of that to stick. But people are like, hey, how come you don't have that Pakistan Hamid Yad accent? I'm like, that got pounded out of me when I was young. My mom's like, no, you're not having that hideous accent. I'm like, okay.
I'm from Wisconsin, and I definitely kind of talked a bit like this. When I was younger, it was more like, oh, I'm from Kenosha.
Oh.
And then I went to Columbia College here in Chicago, and I went there for like theater and eventually became film producing. But the first couple semesters there, I was there for theater. And I had to take voice performance classes.
Yeah.
And they literally trained the accent out of me.
Yep.
They trained me in what's called Midwest Standard, which is very interesting. It's a designed accent. It's not a real accent. It's the accent that like newscasters use and stuff like that.
See.
So it's based on the Midwest accent, but then they take out all the hard vowels.
Okay.
And after like 2 or 3 years, I did not speak like I was from Wisconsin. Yeah. Now it's been a solid 20 years since school.
Got it.
And I can hear it sometimes when in the show. I'll kind of come back into the, I'll get my hard O's a little bit sometimes. Oh yeah, that's great. Oh, I love that Zelda games. But anyways, let's get into it here. We had Lamont Reed, who goes by @ReedLamont2 over on Twitter, replied and said, "Oh wow, I'm so jealous. Looks like so much fun."
Yeah.
Bex, who is Rebel Adi, she is also one of our magical sword people. We can wave to her right now on the magical sword camera.
Thank you.
She said, "Looks like so much fun." Sending hearts. So we got a lot of support there, and so it was really great to be able to share all those tweets of the event and have the feedback. And I hope people enjoyed the episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
So without further ado, let's
main topic.
Let's do it. Yeah.
All right.
So Steph, Majora's Mask. I personally, I'll just kind of get us going here.
Sure.
Personally, I actually really enjoy Majora's Mask. Ocarina of Time came out when I was in high school. I was a senior in high school for me. And I played it a lot, and I was just going into college, Columbia, actually, now that I think about it, somewhere around 2000 or something, 2000, 2001. And I remember Majora's Mask coming out, and I was so excited when I had played Ocarina. I was so excited, so I was very excited for whatever next Zelda happened.
Right.
Just hungry and ready for the next Zelda. And that turnaround was only about a year.
It was very quick, yeah.
Yeah, which is why there's all the recycled assets, of course, and all that kind of stuff. And when Majora's Mask came out, I loved it. It was obviously different. It was the 4 dungeons, the time mechanic. But I remember my first playthrough, I wasn't particularly struck, or maybe even awestruck. I wasn't particularly bothered by many of the changes that happened. I think I was even kind of excited by them. Even with the old school Nintendo 64 save mechanic, which they kind of retroactively fixed a little bit on the 3DS.
Yeah.
What was your introduction to Majora's Mask?
I was a bit late to the game, so I was, I think, around 10 when Ocarina of Time came out, and my parents did not want me playing video games. They thought it would make me stupid. But I had a cousin who lived with me at the time who would play video games. So I would kind of, after I do my homework, I would, sneak into my cousin's room and watch him play Ocarina of Time. And I just was mesmerized.
No, you also memorized it, which is kind of creepy, but I'm just joking.
Well, I did. Yeah, I don't want to.
Well, you kind of did. You kind of did because you kind of used some of that Ocarina of Time inspiration for your first novel.
Yes, I did. So I guess I did memorize and get mesmerized. But anyway. After a couple of years, I was able to convince my parents that, video games aren't bad. It's just another form of media to consume and enjoy. Played Ocarina of Time. So I can't remember at what year I played Majora's Mask, but I know it was years later after it got released. So I was very late to the game. And I was excited because I recognized Link, I recognized the characters. So I appreciated the familiarity. And I know this is all opinion, but the time mechanic, the 3-day cycle, I don't like timed situations in games. It gives me a lot of anxiety. Like a timer. Yeah. And especially when the music gets more, is it dissonant? Throughout each day.
Well, it does. Yeah.
And everyone's like, well, have you played that song that slows down time? I'm like, of course I played this song that slows down time. I'm still on a timer. And I'll admit, I did give up when I tried to do the Kaife.
The Kaife coffee, whatever it is. Yeah.
Yes. Because, it's one of the most popular side quests there. And I think, you have to do things in a certain order, deliver things at a certain time. But I did something in the wrong order. And when I tried to rewind time, I don't know, I couldn't find, I think I broke it.
Oh, missed one of the forks or something.
Yes. Huh? And then I just threw the controller down. I'm like, this stinks. Wow. And then when the 3DS remake came out, I didn't purchase the 3DS remake, but I'm like, I have my old copy. I'm going to try it again. And then I beat it and I did enjoy it.
The old copy being the Nintendo 64
Yeah, in 64,
version?
yeah.
Yeah, I ended up finding, once the 3DS Ocarina and Majora came out, there was like a collector's edition. They were only $20. I picked them both up for my 3DS just for the fun of it, and I'm quite pleased with both. I could go on a whole path about how I actually enjoy a lot of the changes of the Majora's Mask 3D, but that's not what we're here for. We're here for kind of the story of Majora's Mask. Now, there are two stories that are happening. There are two versions. There are two ways to take in the story in Majora's Mask, if I may. I'm kind of trying to set us up here. There is the story of the 3 days, which
Correct.
you can travel through 20, 30, 40 different lanes. You can relive those 3 days over and over and over and get kind of a lateral story of the
Correct.
3 days, which I think is very cool and very interesting. That's a very, to speak about the narrative in Majora's Mask. Okay, we got some happy kids outside right now.
At least they're happy.
Some very happy kids outside the condo. That's great. Sometimes, Kate challenged me once and she said like, well, wait a second, you love to explore, you love to take your own time. Why did you enjoy Majora's Mask if you've got this timer clicking down? And I said, you know what? I think for me, I ended up just accepting the timer and I just loop. If I got to the third day, I just start over and like explore. Instead of exploring geography, like in Breath of the Wild, you just explore timeline. And you just kind of explore another NPC route. You just start, bringing it all together. And so I found that really I was still kind of exploring on my own terms. I was just Groundhog Daying it and looping and going wherever I wanted. And I didn't stress too much about like, was it the thing I was supposed to do? Okay. So that's how I experienced the timeline. But I also think, it's very clear that you still get exposed to the dungeons in a particular order. So even though we can speak about the literal story that's happening inside Majora's Mask, I think there's a larger narrative on how you experience the game. And I think that's what we're going to speak to a little bit more today.
Yeah.
Would you agree?
Yes, absolutely. Yes. And
real
quick though, I like how you explained how you experienced Majora's Mask because I think I was kind of approaching it like Kate mentioned that I wanted to explore as much geography as possible, or I took on too many lanes, so to speak, at once. So the timer made a bigger difference for me. I'm like, well, if I loop back now, then I just kind of lost 75% of my progress.
Yeah, have I lost that progress? Yeah. Right. And I think for me, somewhere early on, it clicked for me that I'm just going to keep looping, and progress is exposure. Progress equals exposure. Anyways, it was a ton of fun for me. So I actually really quite enjoy Majora's Mask. I also, one of the things that I appreciate the most about Majora's Mask, for me, what makes me hold Majora's Mask kind of close to my heart is that I think we all know that behind the scenes, Eiji Aonuma was one of the three main contributors for Ocarina of Time. And, Miyamoto had gone on to many other projects, but Nintendo wanted a fast turnaround on another Zelda game. And because Eiji Aonuma famously was really good at designing temples, he's famous for the Ocarina of Time Water Temple, which I actually think is a very good temple. And he's gone on to design many temples in Wind Waker, many temples in Twilight Princess, and I think Eiji Aonuma he's a brilliant man.
Yes.
For in design and designing these systems and mechanics. I think he's got the knack. But anyway, because he did so well on Ocarina, Nintendo said, well, I guess Mr. Aonuma. Well, I can't even imagine. I'm only paraphrasing what Nintendo said. I can only imagine. But they said, would you be interested in taking on this sequel? And he has said in interviews, and I'm very much paraphrasing, he has said in interviews that he was really excited about the idea, up for the task. In fact, he was overwhelmed with ideas. He had so many ideas of what he wanted to do. And he originally proposed a 7-day loop cycle. He thought about a week.
Yep, I remember that, yeah.
And ultimately, I think, I've said this in previous episodes, maybe back in season 1, I think Miyamoto is a true craftsman and a brilliant man, and has brought he's defined gaming in so many ways, and we owe a lot to him in that way. But one of the things that I think is exciting about Eiji Aonuma, is that I think Eiji Aonuma is actually an artist. I think he wants to express certain things. And even sometimes, I'm looking at you, Majora's Mask and Wind Waker, even at the detriment of the game just a smidge, a lot of times he's really interested in expressing ideas, finding metaphors, and going that route. Yeah,
interpretation, like the word I kept throwing out earlier. I think Aonuma just really loves like putting in or sneaking in like abstract ideas for the player to kind of interpret, again, keyword, for themselves.
I agree completely. So with all that said, we've set up Majora's Mask. many people have recognized that there is a lot of grief metaphors and things like that in Majora's Mask. It's, it's kind of built into the narrative of literally the world will end in 3 days.
Yes.
So would you like to kind of get us going here?
Sure. So one of the most popular, I wouldn't call it a theory, but the way fans and even professionals interpret Majora's Mask is exploring Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's 5 stages of grief. So everybody experiences loss, and loss comes in many forms, whether it's loss of a job, a pet, a loved one, not necessarily death, but certainly can be. And Majora's Mask does have a spot for each stage. And just to remind everyone, it's denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance.
And I think in that order, isn't that right?
It is technically in that order, but reading more from psychologists is that it's ever changing. People can cycle through them, various orders. So I know, I've watched a lot of YouTube videos on this. A lot of people like to criticize the 5 stages of grief, and they're like, well, I didn't experience grief in that order. Or you can't say that, but if you really read the psychology behind Kubler-Ross, it's just kind of like a guardrails, like a frame of how someone can experience it.
And what are the 5 one more time, just so I can even remember?
Yeah, sure. Denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance.
Yeah, I mean, that order does have it kind of makes sense. I imagine everybody can swing around on that wheel however they do, but I think that order does increase in intensity, in my opinion, as I just kind of think about it here as you read them off.
Yes.
And grief and loss is it's a very interesting thing, how people process all of that. And so I can't speak for why IG Aonuma and his team went into these themes. I don't know if it came first or second. I don't know if it was a product of like, wouldn't it be cool if the day ends, if the world's going to end in 3 days and we keep looping, and it came out of that. Or if they kind of, sometimes artists say, there's a thing I want to say, there's a thing I want to express, and they might find a medium or a metaphor to do it. I would love to think it was maybe a little bit of both for this team. So how does this all get started?
So, as many of you know who've played Ocarina of Time, at the very end of the game, Navi leaves or departs at the Temple of Time when Link returns the Master Sword into the pedestal, and it's silent. Well, Link's always a silent protagonist, but Navi does not say goodbye. Navi does not give a reason why. None of us know if she has to leave because that she's going to die, because her mission's over. Some love to theorize that she actually fell in love with Link. I don't know how I really feel about that, or just sometimes it's too painful to say goodbye. So none of us really know, but part of the loss there, because at the beginning of Majora's Mask, you got a cutscene. It's foggy. Link is riding Epona in the forest. Sad music. He is searching for his lost friend and companion Navi.
I think the game literally says he's looking for his lost friend. Isn't that right?
Yeah. Yep. So that's how it opens. He's clearly left Hyrule, or just Hyrule proper. And the way I interpret it is because Link went on all these grand adventures. He made friends and allies with the Goron, the Zora, even some of the Gerudo. Did I say
Gerudo?
Gerudo. Whoa, I'm just brain fart there. Sorry.
Well, I think, yeah, it's all good.
Gerudo. But when he, defeats Ganondorf and he's banished, he returns the sword. He gets to relive his childhood. However, he still carries all those memories with him, but no one remembers.
Oh, because he's in Ocarina, he's time traveled back. So he's done all this hard work, made a lot of sacrifices, put himself in danger a lot, and no one really... Well, you could say he remembers and no one else knows.
Exactly.
Because they haven't experienced it yet and never will if it's an alternate timeline.
Exactly. So if we take that timeline, the only person who's aware of all his achievements and the Great Deku Tree has passed on, it's Navi.
Yes, it's not even Epona.
Yeah.
It's only Navi.
Yes. Oh. So I think that hits even hard. So that's kind of how the stages of grief kicks off. So you have Link, his loss is the loss of his friend Navi, his companion, with the added layer of, because she's the only one that's been through all that with him and still remembers.
And if I may, I'd like to interject. When she leaves at the end of Ocarina, you mentioned like there's no real dialogue. And if I remember correctly, it's even just kind of a wide shot in the Temple of Time, and Navi just flies up through the window. and just takes off. And it's a little bit of a lost in translation moment when Scarlett Johansson whispers into Bill Murray's ear, like she says something but you don't know. In the game, the camera's far enough away that all we see is them looking at each other and Navi flying away. Maybe something was said, maybe it wasn't. I choose to interpret that nothing was said, and that's all we know.
Oh, it's so emotional. And there are times where, hey, listen, has gotten super annoying. But when she departs.
But that's not Navi's fault. That's the game designer's fault. I'm just joking.
No, it's true. It's kind of like, Fi or Fee, whatever people say. Just like, she was kind of annoying. But then when it came to her saying goodbye, I was also almost in tears. Sorry.
Fi's storyline is beautiful. And I loved that that computer would then become poetic and emotional when certain things need to be revealed. So cool.
Yeah. Anyway, but tangent there. So
I don't hate on Navi.
No, exactly. We don't. We love her very much. Yeah. So before we jump into all the stages, he comes to head with Skull Kid, who's wearing Majora's mask. And one little bit that hopefully I'll have in my blog, the article for the AZP blog, is Majora's mask in itself is actually more of a representation of like someone who does not take loss very well, and it just goes untethered and wild, and they just kind of spin out of control. So it's kind of almost like not a warning sign, but like see what grief and loss can do if you don't take the time to process it, which I found very interesting.
Love it. And it's embedded in the mask.
Exactly.
Right? I see.
Yeah, and Skull Kid, at the end, Link was able to help him move past it by
taking the mask off.
But of course, I'm jumping ahead.
Of course. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so, and then boom, we're in Clocktown in Termina. So, and that is recognized as the first stage of grief, and that is denial.
Okay, so wait, I want to dissect that just for a second. No, I only just this moment realized Link's identity is taken from him by Majora's mask when he gets transformed into a Deku. And we already have our first moment of loss as just a simple narrative thing where it's like there's a lot of in-lore reasons how Link became that Deku, and that's fine. That gets dealt with later. But so maybe is there a metaphor there even where now Link isn't even Link anymore? And we could say, well, it's still Link in there, but Link doesn't have the solution. He doesn't have the technology of switching masks yet.
Exactly.
So he is trapped as not Link in a place that's not his. So he has been put in a situation that he can't control.
Yes.
Just like one can't control loss. Maybe I'm stretching here.
No, that makes total sense. Yeah.
So now he's in Clocktown.
Yep. And Clocktown overall is represented with denial. It's very hard to ignore the gigantic, scary moon face peering down on you, which gave me nightmares as a kid. And I think I wrote down his name just so I wouldn't forget. Muto. I think he's the head carpenter. And that was a very famous scene when you go into the mayor's office where he's just calling people cowards. Like, this is a groundless theory. We don't really know, like, that the world's going to end. We should still continue with our festival. Because
we'll just say real quick, the concept there is that this moon is crashing down onto, I guess, the planet that Termina is on, not Termania. That Termina is on. And so, I just thought about this too, though. So if ultimate destruction is on the way in 3 days, this builder whose life's reason for existing is creating things.
Exactly.
He can't deal with, I'm not going to stop creating. I can't, if maybe all the things I've made don't matter if the moon hits. So maybe that feeds some of his denial.
And that makes a lot of sense. I didn't even think about it in that way, but this is why I really love, Ainuma and just the way this game is. Because sure, the 5 stages and maybe the 5 major places we'll touch upon is more quote unquote on the nose, but then there's various little micro representations. And I think the fact that a carpenter is the penultimate representation of denial for a moon destroying the world.
The things that have been built by people.
Yeah.
But anyway, so yeah. So he's in denial in Clocktown. And what does Clocktown represent? The first stage?
First stage, that's denial. I mean, I think the majority of people are trying to conduct business as usual.
Yeah.
So you'll see that the mailman, like he just wants to keep delivering mail up until the very last letter,
You're
I think.
Absolutely right. There is denial happening in Clocktown.
Yep. And there's one of the soldiers that I think is guarding the exits because you're trying to figure out how to leave Clocktown to go into the field, where he kind of recognizes that the end of the world is coming, but he's like, oh, there's not much I can do. I'm just here to guard. Yeah. So he's a mix of denial but acceptance. He's like, it is what it is. Isn't Clocktown under lockdown too? Like he doesn't let people out without a sword or?
Well, yeah, and that's clear. That's definitely a mechanic in the game so that, because Clocktown is interesting in Majora's Mask because it functions as Castletown in Ocarina.
Yeah.
And it equally functions as Kokiri Village in Ocarina.
okay.
It has a double task because it's your opening hub, but then it also becomes the hub you keep coming back to. You know, and you don't want once you get out of Kokiri Village in Ocarina, you go back a little bit for a couple quests here and there, but it's not like you're going back there as a hub. So I think that is a mechanic to have Link not leave in the beginning. But if we're going into like the lore of why it's happening, I think there is some chat, which is common in Zelda games, about like the monsters there are more dangers out there now with the end of the world coming. So we're trying to protect our people. And we can only let people go out if they're protected, I think is where that's coming from, right?
Yep.
Right.
And there's another character that, after thinking about it, makes more sense, but I was, a little shocked. The Scarecrow, the fun little dancing one, he's in the observatory in the astronomer's tower or whatever.
Yeah, the Astrolab or whatever it is.
Yeah. Apparently, because his attitude is very, carefree. He's like, let's dance the night away. That's the game mechanic part of advancing time if you don't want to wait for something. But if you want to look at, either lore-wise or just in psychology, that's more of a reckless view of someone in denial. And if you want to look at metaphors, Scarecrow is stuck in the ground. And that's a representation of, because, denial, even though it might not sound as crushing as like anger or depression, but denial can be pretty tough for a lot of people. Some people can get stuck in denial their whole lives because they don't want to accept or be willing to move forward through the healing process.
Yes.
So I know this is all, again, interpretation keyword, but it's funny that the Scarecrow who's in denial is a creature or whatever that is permanently stuck in place. So it's almost like a cautionary tale. You don't want to be like that guy stuck in place.
Yeah, I love it. I love this.
And if you don't mind, I think there was one mask that stuck out to me as a representation of denial. And for me, he was one of the earlier masks that I obtained, Camaro and Camaro's mask.
Is that the dancing one?
Yeah, the weird, creepy, very nice guy, but he just looked creepy. He was dancing like on a giant mushroom outside of Clock Town. And he could not move on. He just couldn't accept the fact that he died, but was not able to pass on his dance. So in a sense, that's kind of like a denial. But
is he already dead when you meet him? Is he a ghost? I think
he's a ghost.
I mean, okay, I trust you. I believe you. Yeah,
be gentle in your comments.
But he's worried about the dance not getting passed on for sure.
Exactly, his legacy. And
his legacy.
Song of Healing, you're able to help him go through acceptance and teach, I think, the twins in town how to dance.
Indeed, yeah. And you wear this terrifying mask.
Yep.
In fact, I think Camaro's mask, I know, popped up in an episode in season 1 or 2, and it might have been Caton's. It might have been the episode of like top 10 silliest items or something. And the aesthetic of that mask is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Link loses his face, and there's like a unicorn head of Camaro. Yeah. But when we speak about it in this context, it's really it's kind of sweet and it's really interesting.
Yeah. So that's all I could really think about for denial. I don't know if there's anything you want to touch upon.
No, I think we've done a really nice job here. I think, denial. Also, I'm just kind of speaking off the cuff here, just whatever's coming to my brain with this, but we have this hub. It is a town. It is not the wild. It is protected. It has walls around it. And if you stay inside, if you don't go out, if you don't deal with things, some of that denial can be fed inside this structure. There's a little bit of that happening too.
Yeah.
So we are able to move past denial in the game, metaphorically speaking, by heading to our first dungeon. I'm going to guess? In
the southern swamp and in the Deku Palace, which you also kind of have to infiltrate. But just real quick, I think the majority of people will tackle these dungeons in the same order. But I think technically a player could go to almost any area that they please, right? Like, I don't think it's as linear. There's a few. It's a little bit of that Metroid thing where some of the areas are locked by items, I guess you could say. I think the Deku situation kind of has to be first. Yeah.
Then maybe it's one of these things where I feel like it's Goron's next. Maybe it's Zora next. But I think maybe I might be confusing this with Spirit Temple and Shadow Temple in Ocarina, which you can do in either order. But maybe the Icona Valley.
I think you need something, but I just like to point out that Majora's Mask, like out of all the Zelda games, it's definitely not the most linear, and it makes me think of the 5 stages of grief, where it's not always linear as well.
Okay,
so
cool.
Another
I'm into
tidbit. So we go to the Deku Palace in the Southern Swamp, and we now hit anger, and that's just the perfect portrayal of anger there, because not only is there very kind of really energized music, but the king, the Deku King, he is very PO'd that his daughter has gone missing, and he directs all his anger at the princess's friend, who's a monkey, a lot of monkeys in Zelda, and he's basically sentencing this monkey to death without like a proper trial, no real evidence. He's just like,
this is a literal attack. It's a literal like someone hitting someone, metaphorically speaking. Wow, it is just raw anger.
Lashing out, and that's what a lot of people do. And people don't like being in control. It makes sense. I don't like not being in control.
Right.
So I think the anger is a way for humans to, or people, whatever, to process something that they can't control and find a way to grasp onto some level. So for the Deku King, he's like, well, you know what? Like, for example, the monkey, like, well, maybe he was thinking inside, like, even if he really didn't actually do the crime, like if he was her friend, like, why didn't he do something? So you know what? You're going to have to pay. Someone needs to pay.
And in the background, what's really probably happening is he's thinking, I can't control in any way bringing my daughter back or doing something about that, but I can at least control this, and at least, and he's probably not conscious about it, I can check a thing off the list. Like a thing has happened. I've done a thing. Yeah, that's nuts. Mm-hmm. And anger is tricky because it can be, I was thinking about that with the lashing out at the friend. It can be, well, actually, I've honestly lost my thought about it. So why don't we just keep going? Maybe it'll come back to me.
Oh, yeah, sure. I also think about Link in this journey, too. So like you said, because he got turned into a Deku Scrub first, it is technically really very heavily directing you to do that temple first. That'll be the first time, maybe, that a player will play through the dungeon. And by the time you defeat the boss, you actually have to go back, and you'll notice that when you return back to day 1, say you head back to the southern swamp, Princess is still missing. The swamp is still poisoned. Like, Link went through all that trouble to cleanse the swamp, save the princess, and all that good stuff, only to go back in time, because the moon is going to crush everybody, to see all of his efforts kind of still like get reversed essentially.
He technically was able to bring a key back or bring a medal back, which helps the mechanic of the game move forward, but emotionally speaking, that's got to take a real toll. I did all this work and I go back there and nothing's changed because I've gone back in time.
Exactly. And that's what Zelda's famous for, is the character Link. A lot of fans are able to project very easily onto Link as a character.
It is designed that way.
Yeah. And I feel that, I can sense a bit of anger in Link or myself, because if that were me, and that was my first temple that I went through. Well, first of all, again, I'm here in Termina. I've lost my title as Hero of Time. I'm a nobody here, and I just risk my life.
I've lost my physical identity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I've risked my life to go through this first temple. And for what? Obviously we'll get past the anger, but I saw myself getting a bit frustrated too in that first place. I'm like, oh, there's the anger. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I love this. This is great because even Link has to kind of sneak in to, so you're hiding. He has to shield himself from someone lashing out in many ways, a culture, an entire society now that's lashing out in many ways. And that's even tragic right there. Exactly. And
that to interface and to help, they even have to hide to get there.
Exactly. Right. And people, will make assumptions that, you have bad intentions and they just don't want to engage. So there's anger has a lot of different faces,
That's great. What's the boss? I wonder if there's a metaphor with the boss.
Adalwa or Adolwa. I'm never good at pronouncing these bosses' names in Majora's Mask.
And the boss ones are tricky, Majora. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
What's the mechanic of the boss is escaping me right now. Do you recall?
Well, I
always remember Goat is what it is. I always remember the Goron one.
I know he's like a jungle warrior. I know he like dances and sings before he attacks, and he has a big sword. So I don't know if that...
Yes. Okay, yeah. Okay, I guess it's attack, yeah.
Yeah, he was a very fun boss. But as far as the mechanic, I forgot. All I know is that, Goat, again, is very easy because it's kind of like...
Everyone remembers Goat.
But I think, I just remember Odwalla that just dancing, jumping, singing, attacking with a sword.
Oh,
so that's
yeah.
all I
Basically, it was
remember.
a bipedal creature, wasn't it? Kind
Yes,
of?
yep.
Yeah, and a big funky mask and stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, this is all coming back to me
Yeah,
now.
he was actually a fun boss, and I know this is a complete stretch, but I remember the mask itself, such like an angry face.
Yeah. Yeah, I love this. Well, I think we should go to break.
Yep.
And here's some ads for stuff. And we'll come back and we're going to discuss the other three areas. The other three. So what do we have left now? We want to gone from anger. Bargaining. Oh.
That's an interesting one.
And
Depression.
then depression and then acceptance.
Acceptance, yeah.
Acceptance is one of those where when it comes after depression, it's very difficult. I feel, I could be totally wrong about this, I feel that for many people, it's really hard to accept acceptance coming out of depression because it could so easily feel like you have lost or something.
Exactly,
you know?
conceding to defeat.
Yeah, but the truth is you're winning. You're anyways, but we can get into that after the break.
Stay tuned.
Very good. Steph, I'm loving this. This is great.
I'm glad.
I've been needing some Majora's Mask conversation in my life lately.
Been a while, yeah.
I'm so pleased we had some time to do this. Okay, we're going to go to break. We'll be right back.
Jake, have you ever been looking for a definitive Nintendo ranking and can't seem to find it because it's just everybody's own opinion?
Honestly, all the time, Sam.
Well, I'm looking for someone to give us the answers.
Wait, you mean like a podcast made by two young, handsome men where they create a definitive top 5 list of all things Nintendo?
Should we just do it ourselves?
Yeah, that sounds fantastic.
Let's give it a shot. I'm Sam.
And I'm Jake.
And at Top 5 Nintendo, I'm going to give you my top 5 list.
And I'm going to give you my top 5 list.
And then we're going to duke it out and see what the real top 5 is.
1 heist. 6 plots for betrayal. When Raya Cautela cons 5 other thieves into helping her steal a magical artifact from the most powerful man in the world, she knows she's playing with fire. What she doesn't know is that the rest of her crew is just as underhanded as she is, and they all have plans of their own. MJ Kuhn's Among Thieves, a fantasy heist novel full of twists, turns, and betrayal, available beginning September 7th wherever books are sold. Visit mjkuhn.com for more details.
All right, Steph, we are back from the break. I'm a bit hoarse for some reason, so why don't you tell us about where we're heading next?
I got you talking a lot. Now we're gearing toward Snowhead, and that stage in particular is bargaining. Very interesting stage. Some people like to, after going through a lot of anger and lashing out, and they finally realize they're not going to get what they want, like someone passing or a friend moving away, and days and weeks of being angry, you realize, well, that friend's not coming back or my pet's not coming back. Mm-hmm. So that's when they might want to start bargaining either with themselves or with other people. It could be, very literal, or it could be just a mental thing. And in this case, Darmani, and sometimes I do confuse the Goron names because they're very similar, Daruni and Darmani. Yeah. He passed, I believe, around the time when Skull Kid went through and just froze the entire area, and he tried to Darmani tried to save his tribe, and Link finds him. I
think he basically falls off a cliff, or he takes a big gets a big cut from falling off a cliff, and Link does find him. Yep,
he has to use either their version of the Lens of Truth. I don't know if it's called a scope or something in there. And Darmani is shocked that he can see him, and he's like, "Please save me, please, help me." Get back to my tribe so I can save them. And then when he realizes that he can't truly be resurrected, he goes, at least bring me to peace. Like, please, I don't want to be a restless ghost and watch, my people suffer.
Right.
So even though he can't be raised from the dead, he wanted at least that. So Link plays a song of healing, and he's very grateful. And in return, so to speak, he gives him the Goron's mask.
Right. Yes.
So I didn't really have too much notes for that. I can understand why people want to, bargain. I think it's a bit of desperation. I know that kind of is a negative connotation to it, but I think that's very natural.
So the bargaining aspect in grief is we've gone from anger to thinking, well, if anger is at least I can do something. Broad strokes here. If anger is at least I can do something, and that does or doesn't work, or maybe you've accepted that you can't just do something, you go, well, maybe I can exchange something.
Exactly.
Maybe I can give something to get something. and it turns into that part. That feels like it's the next
Yeah,
step.
I think this isn't the best example, but it's kind of the only one I can really think of with a real life application, because it's hard to go through bargaining when you actually lost someone to death, because you can't really bring someone back, would be the loss of when you're in a relationship. If you're happily in a relationship and unfortunately it breaks down, first you might be in denial. You're like, no, that didn't happen. They'll come around the next day.
Yeah.
And then you get angry. You're like, well, why didn't, he or she, or they express how upset they were with me or whatever? We could have worked this out. And when they still haven't heard from the person, that they might, that those nights, sometimes we've all been there, guys, text that person, call that person, and just kind of see like, is there something I did? Maybe, next time we'll make it right if I do this. Like, if I call you more, will you give us another chance? So again, that's, bad example. This is not applicable to Zelda, but, I can see that bit of desperation in Darmani, and it's out of love. He really cares about all the Gorons, and he just would do anything.
Yeah, I think this is tracking. I think this is lining up, actually, because that entire area was frozen. It was attacked. Whereas, the Deku's fine. The daughter got lost and they were very upset. But now we're in a part that's it's a frozen area. It's locked. There is a transaction of a bargain to try to help it change. That's the intent. I think another example of people who might deal with the bargaining aspect in a elevated way is like if someone finds that they are ill or even maybe like terminally ill or something that. You feel like maybe there's still something I can do during this time. I think that's something that could be very challenging to get through. And I guess that is happening there in Snowheed as well. Is it Snowheed? Snowhead?
Snowhead, yeah.
I probably read it as Snowheed. I read everything wrong.
Yeah, sometimes the names can be kind of interchangeable. Like, it's, like Snowhead, then Snow Peak, and like Twilight Princess. But anyway. And
then we have Goat as the boss.
Yeah.
Yep. Unlocks it. Goat's a robot. I don't know if there's too much metaphor there.
No.
What I'm learning is it's not so much the metaphors aren't so much in the bosses as they are in these stories that are happening in these areas.
Exactly,
and how the cultures in because you travel to 4 different areas.
Yeah.
And those areas all have their own little microcultures. And I think that's really what we're exploring.
And they're all going through their particular challenges. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And ultimately, and so some are, so Snowhead is a situation where maybe they are less worried about the moon crashing down because they're already frozen. They're already attacked.
Right.
So maybe they're not as focused on the day. What would be interesting, and I don't recall if this is true, but it would be very interesting if any character in the Goron area says, well, we're already frozen. It doesn't even matter because the moon's crashing down. Oh, but that's not part of bargaining. So it doesn't really, I don't think it really happens in that area.
Yeah. I mean, maybe that's part of what bargaining is. Maybe, who knows, like they are acutely aware of the greater situation, but they're like, we at least just want our home to be the way it was. So, I don't know, if the end of the world happens, we can at least be home.
Yeah. Yeah, so. Sure. Yeah. Oh, yeah, that really reminds me of Romani Ranch and stuff like that. But we can't, let's not go there right now. Okay. For now, I believe that most people, I think the game brings you to not Zora's domain, but the Zora portion.
Yeah, and this is where I do have a couple notes so I don't butcher it, but it's Great Bay.
The Great Bay, indeed.
Depression.
Yes.
And boy, that really is sends a strong message. And I think depression, again, it varies per person, is a very major part of the cycle.
I just realized, there is not depression in Snowhead or with the Dekus. Yeah. There is not that. Okay, I love this. This is lining up for me.
Yeah, and I think in real life too, I think a lot of people can get stuck in depression as well. When we get to Great Bay, the music is just very. It's a little more low key, but it's unsettling. It definitely gives me depression-like vibes. I know I probably shouldn't I'm not making light of it at all. First, you meet Mikau. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. He's the guitarist for the Indiegogo's, and he's injured. Then he dies. I can't recall if he's out there because he was looking for Lulu's eggs, but that's kind of the primary analogy there, is that Lulu, also in Indiegogo's, her eggs were stolen, I think, by the pirates.
Yeah.
Gerudo pirates.
Maybe.
And she is found staring listlessly at the sea. She won't talk to you. She doesn't say any words.
You're right. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, the community is like, she's not responsive, and that's, part of depression. Like a key trait is isolating oneself.
That is absolutely happening here. Mm-hmm. Wow. And even the whole Great Bay, it's completely abandoned with the exception of this character.
Yeah.
it's fascinating. When you go to the Zora's area, is there any depression expressed there? I know everyone's kind of on lockdown a little bit. No one can. Obviously, the band can't play.
Yeah,
but in general, what's the temperament inside there? It's not Zora's domain. It's called something else. I can't recall right now. But when we meet all those characters, is it a similar temperament?
I think a lot of the NPCs were primarily worried about Lulu, which can symbolize all the friends that are worried about the person going through loss. They're like, oh, like for example, Stephanie is just kind of been in her house all day. What's going on?
Right.
I actually see a little bit of denial. So again, like, this is all not, it's not black and white. With, I think, the other band members, I think the manager or whoever,
right.
He's like, oh, she'll get over it. She'll be back. I recall that kind of an attitude. So I'm thinking like he's kind of in denial of how severe her situation is.
Mm-hmm. But we could twist that into still this part of this depression thing. Because now I guess what we're dealing with a person who's experiencing depression, great depression. She's not even functioning as a Zora. And we can, if we go out one layer from there, it's the people that are then almost dealing with that grief of that person. It's like a micro bubble inside that bubble.
Yeah.
I'm realizing.
Yeah, and then there's also just the overall metaphor of the ocean or the sea, which I know people use the ocean or the sea for many meanings, but the ocean can be very, very deep. It's very, very vast. So some people can just really drown in their depression. When Link gets the Zora's mask, he has to kind of explore the depths. You have to really kind of go through that process. And going through depression, it's part of life. You have to go through it. But the important thing is you got to try not to stay there too long,
Yes, I agree. And theoretically, I mean, as a video game, I think some of this gets solved by Link finding finding the eggs and bringing things back, and then. Do you remember how she reacts to that? I mean, I kind of don't.
I don't either.
Okay, fair enough. No problem. We don't have to focus on it. Let's move on to the. So Akana Valley is fascinating. I always really enjoyed that area. It's rough when you first get there.
Yes. I found it very interesting when I first learned that Akana Valley translates to acceptance, because Akana Valley is death.
Yeah. There's a lot of literal aesthetic death in that. There's like skeletons and graves and stuff like that.
Gibdos and stuff like that.
Yeah, attacking you. Kind of a ghost town situation.
Right. But at the same time, there is another aspect of death that many people may not want to recognize, that it's almost like transformative. You don't have to necessarily believe in life after death, but it is, you're transitioning from, life to death. And for some that believe death to an afterlife, it depends. Sure. And I mean, technically in a fantasy world such as Zelda, there is afterlife, but more in the form of like pose and what do you call it? Skeletons.
It gets a little wonky.
Right. But that's fine, because, you don't want to offend anyone, and it's all just for, like I said, interpretation and whatever.
Well, and then what's interesting is that the pose are different than ghosts, which are different than spirits.
Right.
But it's all good.
Yeah. So that acceptance is recognized as transformative. I believe it is important to recognize it's not just a final destination. Like, you still got to journey through and carry on with a new chapter in your life, which Link has to go through. And I think there are very interesting items and modes in that part of the game where you're near the end of the game. Like, for example, he gets the mirror shield. I think that's a bit on the nose, but mirror shield, it's reflective. You look back on all that you've been through. Or you play, and I had to write this down because I forgot the name of the song, the Elegy of Emptiness.
Yes.
Yep, you have to, where Link kind of makes one copy of each of his forms. So he kind of needs to recognize and look into who he's been.
Yes, he's literally creating shells of the. I mean, there's a mechanic there where you can cleverly put on the mask and create more shells. But I don't. That's beside the point. The fact that you play this song and you create a shell of yourself that then you can use and observe, and they look a little creepy, but I don't know. Yeah,
and then I don't want to necessarily jump too far, and it's technically not in Akana Valley, but it's symbolic toward the end of the game. Is you're at that point working to get to. Collecting all the rest of the masks. You don't get a transformative mask in that part of the game, right? You don't, No, you don't. You're right. So ultimately, if you want to collect everything, you get the Fierce Deity's mask, which that's kind of, it looks like teen Link, but super funky. So it's almost kind of like you become stronger, you grow, you mature from all your sacrifices, all that you've been through, all those trials. So I can kind of like make the stretch of that kind of being what you're reaching for, so to speak.
I gotta say, something just struck me just now as we were talking about this. These brief moments at the end of the game, after the big Majora fight and all of that, when you're walking around in a weird spiritual plane and you're speaking to the children.
Yes.
And the children are representing, in my opinion, all the different children are representing different subconscious entities of the Majora conflict.
Yeah.
They ask really they ask questions that really
very deep.
Yeah, exactly. Very deep questions, but they make you they're questions that are almost statements, is what I'm trying to say. You know, by asking the question, they're almost stating certain things. And when you meet the little kid by the tree and all of that, for me, I think there's a certain amount of acceptance that happens there as well. You know, and I think a kind of Valley has that as well. But the resolution in Majora's Mask, when you're dealing with this, okay, maybe it's an epilogue. Maybe that's really technically an epilogue, because now we've had this Majora character. If these things that Link, it's interesting because Link isn't experiencing these 5 steps. He is going to places that are experiencing these 5 steps. And maybe in some ways that's an extension of the Majora spirit going through those 5 steps. Is Majora specifically pulling the moon down? Or is the moon just coming down? I can't recall. I feel like I usually connect the two, that like Majora has put a spell on the moon and is bringing the moon to crash down.
Funny that you mentioned that, because I remember at the start of the game, everyone was already kind of freaking out that the moon was going to crash onto the earth, and the moon was very abnormally close to the surface. But when you reach the final hours of the 3rd day, the first time around, Skull Kid with Majora's Mask on does that high-pitched wail, which really sends chills up my spine.
That's creepy.
That makes like it. I don't know how to describe it, but the moon shakes and it starts glowing. So it seems that the moon might already be kind of on course, but I think he's just accelerating it. Like, I'm ready to die here. Let's just go.
Yeah, and so in some ways we might be dealing with what I'm kind of spiraling towards here, towards the end of the episode, is maybe I'm reaching, but maybe what we're dealing with is if in many ways the mask, or Majora, will say, is going through this loss, maybe this has been, maybe we're really dealing with the story of Majora here, is what I'm trying to say.
Yep.
And Majora going through the stages of loss, and then Link is traveling through those stages because I believe that each area, the plight that has come to the area is because of a choice that Majora has made. Isn't that right?
Exactly, yeah. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the pod, that Majora's Mask itself almost is kind of a representation of kind of grief gone kind of wild, like a maladjusted entity. So you could almost say that in ways, in a very broad sense, Link's traveling through this journey to help Majora, maybe not actively help, but help Majora go through these stages. And then when we finally do get to the end battle, there's a battle because it's a game. Right. But when we deal with like really going in, because there's also the 4 gods that can actually technically stop. The giants,
the giants that can stop the moon and all that stuff.
Very long-legged giants.
There's that too. I don't know if there's much symbolism there, but if we're focusing on Majora and Majora's journey with grief, I really do think it all kind of comes together then in those final moments with the children. It
does. And you know what? We can't forget about Skull Kid himself, because in a sense, he's going through grief because he's a very lonely child, does not have a lot of friends.
Yeah.
And he initially kind of started going wayward because he lost his friends, the 4 giants. The 4 giants were his friends.
Oh, really? I don't recall that.
Yep.
What?
Yeah. And I guess, because the giants, they're guardians, they have to protect their respective areas. But So Skull Kid took it as a personal loss, like, oh, they don't want to play with me anymore.
Wow.
And then, he's kind of going through his all internal struggle where he kind of, again, runs into the Happy Mask salesman. And he's also mischievous anyway. So he ends up rifling through, picking up Majora's mask. And it's almost kind of like, so Skull Kid's also going through these stages of grief. He's lost something. And maybe he's kind of going towards the path or destructive path of Majora, whereas maybe Link is kind of like, no, you got to just healthily go through these stages and
deal with them.
Get to acceptance. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely. And Skull Kids is interesting because in my opinion, by the end of the game, you do come to very much realize that Skull Kid probably was susceptible to a lot of these things, but Skull Kid was kind of a vessel for Majora in many ways. And so maybe Majora's mask was keen to reach out to Skull Kid when Skull Kid was curious. Yeah. Maybe Skull Kid was susceptible to this kind of thing. And then that was exponentially, it was amplified, I guess.
Yeah. And it makes sense. When we go through loss, whether we like to admit it or not, we are all very vulnerable and easily influenced. And another thing about acceptance, because keep in mind that acceptance is not about...
It's all good. We're in the city of Chicago. It's okay. It's
not about getting back what you lost, because at the end, Skull Kid did not get his 4 giant... they're still friends. Will always be your friends.
Like they help, but they're not... It didn't go back to point A.
Point A where they were playing with him.
Yeah.
But what Skull Kid got out of it was a friendship with Link.
So you move... So Skull Kid finds or gets what Skull Kid missed, but it's a new situation. It's different. So that is absolutely, literally moving on. Well, I don't know. Okay. Yeah, maybe literally, but anyway, figuratively, it's moving on. This is really cool.
Yeah, right. It's almost like full circle. And remember, Link, by the end, he still hasn't found Navi, but he's kind of made friends with, is it Tattle and Tail? I forgot which one was the one that went with him. I always confuse them because they sound so similar.
Yeah.
He can't get Navi back, but I still feel like, Link is moving on. He's made friends with Skull Kid, the other fairies, and
And he moves on in a way as well. Yep. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, Steph, this was wonderful.
Yes. I had a lot of fun talking about this.
Man, I needed an episode like this. This is cool.
Yeah, and I was always looking forward to, especially I do appreciate you liking to record in person.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of fun. Yeah.
It's nice, isn't it?
Yeah.
When I've said it. It's a beautiful gift to be able to record over the internet so that people can have shows that they couldn't even have otherwise. Mm-hmm. But when you have conversations about this kind of stuff, you can have the reality of cars honking horns at you.
Exactly.
I'm just joking. But it's nice to. I don't want to get weird, but like sit in the room with the person, look at their face, like look at their eyes, know what they're thinking. You can kind of work off each other. And I think it's really nice to have those kind of experiences.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I know you have to move on to your next appointment, and I'm really appreciative that you were willing to spend this time so that we could record something.
Thank you so much for your time. Like, it's really honestly such an honor not to be all mushy and stuff. Because remember, I started as a fan. I just really fell in love with this podcast. I love the shirt. When you get that all taken care of, I'm going to be getting one of those.
I'm wearing, I guess our listeners can't hear, but I'm wearing Another Zelda Podcast shirt. It's the first piece of AZP merch that has ever really existed. I mean, we've got some stickers and postcards and whatnot, but I found a t-shirt company that I like, and they sent me a sample. Mm-hmm. So I'm literally wearing that sample right now as we record, and I think hopefully this is the opening the door to a situation of having a lot of nice ways that we can have a little bit of merch. It's
Let me know
fun.
when you finalize the design. I'll be one of the first people to buy it.
Most definitely. Okay, well, Steph, thank you for everything you do for the website and the blog writing, and I look forward to future episodes with you. And if anybody wants to find more things about you or some of the books you've written, where can they find you?
Sure. So I can be found on Twitter and Instagram at Klimov, KLIMOV _author. And I think the Facebook page is at Klimov author, just no underscore. So.
Wonderful. And basically that will root out to everything from there.
Exactly. Huh? Or you can just find me. I'm sure there's like an About Us page on Another Zelda Podcast.
Yeah, there is. There is, with social links and stuff.
Exactly. So you know what? Just make it easy. Just hop on there and you've got all the places to click.
Find Stephanie there over at AnotherZeldaPodcast.com. You can find Another Zelda Podcast on Twitter and Instagram at Another Zelda Pod and Another Zelda Podcast, I think, respectively. And also you can find us on YouTube and Facebook. We're Stitcher now, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Just search Another Zelda Podcast.
Hard
You'll
to
find
miss.
us.
Hard to miss.
I'm on Instagram and Twitter at Raptor Paint. And with that, Steph, I'll absolutely see you next time. It'll probably be a little bit of time, but I'll see you next time.
Can't wait. Thank you.